Today we've got the writers of Thor and X-Men First Class, Ashley Miller and Zack Stentz, right here on BFD. History doesn't always have to be stale and boring, and it doesn't always have to come from textbooks. Here to talk about the fascinating intersection between entertainment and history are our good friends Zack Stentz and Ashley Miller. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Oh, it's so our pleasure.
So let's talk a little bit about X-Men First Class. Now, one of the coolest things about this film is that it was set during the Cuban Missile Crisis. How did that idea come about?
Actually, that was Bryan Singer, the producer,
Really?
the producer's idea. He wanted to work in real history, so he thought that the big historical incident should be the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Are you guys history buffs?
One of the kind of dirty little secrets about writing science fiction and fantasy is that you go to history all the time for your inspirations, because real history is so fascinating and so unlikely in its own way.
So what is the research process like?
First, you have to remember that you're not writing a movie about powers,
History.
right? Well, you're not writing it about like the guys who can, move stuff with their mind or read minds. You're writing it about these young men with very specific problems and very specific issues who are products of their time. For Eric, who eventually becomes Magneto, even his origin is tied up in history, going back to the Holocaust.
Sure.
And he has an emotional relationship with that. If you make it about the powers, you're not really making it about anything. You're just making it about stuff blowing up, and you can do that anytime.
Yeah, and if you think about it, JFK had a superpower. He could pick up the phone and order
call Marilyn Monroe.
Well, yeah, that was one. But he could also order 1,000 nuclear weapons to be launched with by picking up a phone. What greater power could there be than that?
Calling Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, probably.
Where do you guys start? So Bryan Singer comes to you guys and then he's like, Cuban Missile Crisis. Where do you start?
One of the more subtle and difficult challenges of structuring the film was, how do you build to the Cuban Missile Crisis and make that feel like history is marching along, make it feel like we're intersecting with that process? That's really task one, is that thought experiment.
If there was a tremendously powerful mutant named Sebastian Shaw who was behind the scenes manipulating things to try and bring about a nuclear war, how would he fit in each of those things?
And where would he get a submarine?
There was an actual submarine trailing the Soviet cargo ships as they came there. It was a Russian submarine rather than a mutant submarine, and at one point the American fleet started depth charging it. And the captain of the submarine wanted to launch a nuclear torpedo at the American fleet. And it was only because the second in command of the submarine refused to authorize the torpedo launch that there wasn't a nuclear exchange that would have probably escalated.
If you think about it, there's a really fascinating thematic parallel with Eric and Charles on that beach. The decisions really come down to, in that movie and in history, are we going to destroy the world today? And why? And for who? And that's huge. And in some ways, simply having those two guys in that incredibly heightened situation makes it easier to deal with, I think. And in some ways makes it more relatable, because you can bring it back to their relationship in a very specific, personal way. The connections between the history, I think, and the drama can just be fascinating the more you unpack them.
History can be found everywhere, and even in places you least expect it, say like a huge blockbuster movie about superheroes. So I have a challenge for you. Be like a superhero and take action by clicking the links in the description below. For BFD, I'm Marisha Ray, and don't forget to subscribe.
Two historians can have absolutely differing viewpoints about the same event in history, and the fascinating thing is, both can be equally as valid. To prove this point, let's take a somewhat recent event in history.